On the debate tonight, exam pressure claims 19 young lives. In Telangana, close to 3 lakh students have failed the Class 11 and 12 Telangana State Board exams. Parents and students claim major goof-ups in the checking process by the board that has declared that 3 lakh students failed.
First year physics lo 51 vastayi, year 8 chesinaru sir. 8 marks, asalu nenu expectation marks 50 kanna 8 marks chesinaru. I didn't asalu nenu expect cheyalenu. Asalu chaala unfair chesinaru. Maaku MSET kuda raayalekapothunanu nenu.
Now, the Telangana High Court has asked the board to re-evaluate the papers of the failed students. And waking up to the widespread protests, Telangana Chief Minister has ordered a free re-verification of intermediate papers. It's not just Telangana where students are unable to cope with exam pressure. According to the national data, as many as 9,474 students committed suicide in 2016. That is one student every hour. Mirror now asks, why are young minds unable to cope with exam pressure? It's time to talk exam pressure.
Just the idea of 19 12th standard students committing suicide over 2 days because of the results in Telangana was something that personally really scared me. And I do know that currently all of the other news channels are on Varanasi and the elections and the road show. We've chosen to follow a different story. The Telangana government has made a series of mistakes that might have led to the botching up of its 12th standard exam evaluations. As a result, students across the state who would normally top their exams have failed. Several of them will not be able to take their entrance exams for the next category of education that they will have to enter. But worse still, nearly 20 students have taken their own lives. Which means that in the 3 or 4 days it took for the protests and the media to insist on a revaluation, for the Chief Minister to actually order it, these students took their lives. They felt like they couldn't wait 3 or 4 days. They felt like there was no hope. They felt desperate. And the question I want to ask you tonight, as you are at home today, do you know if your child is desperate? Do you know if your child feels like there's no hope? Do you think that your child perhaps believes that his or her entire life is hinging on this one exam and they only get one shot at it? Are we raising an entire generation of people who are crumbling under pressure? Our phone lines are open because I want you to call and ask questions. The idea over the next 1 hour is to answer as many questions as possible. On the show with me, Dr. Harish Shetty is a very senior psychiatrist. Bella Raja is a child guidance counselor and a special educator, so she also knows the education system. Dr. Sameer Dalwai is the National President of Development Chapter and the President of the Mumbai branch of Indian Academy of Pediatrics. And of course, Harish Iyer is a social activist who actually talks to those who feel suicidal, who pick up the phone and get in touch with him, and he helps them sort of cope with what they're going through and work their way out of that situation. So the simple question to ask is this: do you know if your child is under pressure? And if you do find your child under pressure, what do you do? My first question to Harish Shetty. Dr. Shetty, how can we tell if there is a young person who's under pressure, especially now this is the season of exam results over the next 1 month? How does a parent tell if their child is okay or not?
If a child is avoiding discussing the exam marks which is around, if he says that he would like to stay away from the day from the house and would want to run away from the house, if he quietly locks himself in his room all the time and shies and keeps away from the family members, if he eats less, sleeps excessively, avoids friends, and also says that he is not sure about his results, if he talks about he being a burden to the family, he being hopeless, worthless, if he says that he wants to go to God and he wants to end his life, any of these symptoms err on the side of meeting a mental health professional. Also at times, he might say things like, even if I'm gone, you will remember me only for a few days. What will happen to you guys after I go? And so many of them also don't want to see they do not want their parents to be around when they receive the results online or through school or a college, and they would say that they would want to see it alone. So many of them also are very scared because they have promised their parents that they would get 90, 85 or 95, and they know heart and heart that they have not done well, and they are very ashamed to look into the eyes of the parents. Families which have a software of allowing children to share bad news are those families which can protect and save children who are extremely distressed.
Harish, you get a lot of questions from, or you get a lot of calls from people who perhaps are contemplating suicide?
Yes, that's right.
How often is it about education or exams?
It's, in fact, after the education season, whenever there's a test or anything of that kind, then the number of calls increase.
Okay.
And many a times it would be about, I'm really scared whether my parents are going to accept it or not, whether what face will I have to show my parents because I think I'm going to fail in this, or I have not done this paper. And sometimes you can dismiss it as anxiety, but this anxiety and the fear of the result is not something that's very that's very healthy. And as Dr.
So let me ask you a very basic question. I know a lot of people are going to think about it. So we did board exams.
Yeah.
At some point in our lives, we all did. Is it different now than it was then for us?
I failed my board exams too.
Okay.
So I failed in my 12th standard. And when I failed in my 12th standard, I found it equally difficult to go home and to tell because of all the expectations, though I knew right from the beginning that I had not done a couple of papers well, but the whole fear of, you know, losing your friends, them getting, and this is
the fact that your friends will judge you.
The friends would judge you and they would go further, you lag behind.
Yes.
And all these things, and in addition to that, they build a whole story around the child. That, oh, you know what, now you're going to get into engineering, you're going to get into medical. And so they build this very lovely story, and you know that all that story is going to just come tumbling down just because you have failed one exam, you know, and you could have failed because of many reasons, but those things we are not made okay with failure.
Will you do me a favor and look into camera and tell people that failing is not the end of the world? Your life is fine, you're successful, you're doing really well. It is not the end of the world.
I personally feel that failure is not the end of the world. I think it's okay to fail, and it's okay to be mediocre as well. I mean, you don't always need to be perfect. You don't need to subscribe to the idea of perfect. It's absolutely fine if you come second, if you come 10th, or even if you fail.
Absolutely. You know, I want to ask you this question, Ms. Raja. You also work with education. Has the education system reached a point now where it's failing students in some way or adding more pressure now than it did earlier?
It certainly is adding much more pressure than it did earlier.
Okay.
The portions are really very vast. The teaching methods are not adequate. Everything is more or less rote. You have to memorize a number of things. A lot of the questions are objectives where you answer within one word. So there's a lot of rote going on, and you can memorize to a point. If concepts are not taught to you, you can only remember so much and not more. So the pressure on the student, I have dealt with children who are trying to do their entire course by memorizing it. Okay. And you ask them any question, it is verbatim from what the text is. You ask them any question which is slightly off, they don't have an answer.
And now, how does this add pressure to the individual?
This adds pressure because you cannot memorize so much. You can't memorize entire textbooks and reproduce it in your examination sheet. You need to have a conceptual understanding of the theories that come in your history or geography or science or whatever. You need to know. And if you can't do that, and that is also not being taught.
So, you know, when I had conversations with the young people on my team, they were telling me about how now tuitions start at the 6th standard or the 7th standard, and it's all
Much
about
earlier.
how much earlier, you think?
Absolutely.
In order to get into an engineering college or a medical college, people are studying in the 6th standard?
My whole question is, if you're going to sacrifice your today for tomorrow and tomorrow for the day after, when are you living your life?
Really.
You know?
There are the nursery and pre-primary children
Yes.
go to classes so that they are trained on how to answer questions when they go for admission to school.
So they're going to classes in order to go to classes?
Yes.
Oh my God. So basically it is, and is this, and you'll always have this question of whether sometimes the parents think that there's too much homework and the school is putting too much pressure, and the school thinks that the parents are putting too much pressure. Where is the problem according to you?
It's the homework that is given. See, it's all about, now if I give you 50 sums to do and you do it all the same way, and then I give you one sum which is expressed in a different manner, you can't do it because you don't know. There are children who are in the 4th standard and the 5th standard who cannot define addition. They'll tell you it's plus, then they'll tell you it's add, but when you say what are you actually doing, and then you extend it to subtraction, multiplication and division, they don't know what they're doing.
I also want to bring in Dr. Dalwai at this point. Dr. Dalwai, you work with students with learning disabilities. And my concern here is effectively depression and suicide. Now, a lot of people thought that depression is something that only adults deal with. But we understand now that adolescents are perhaps the worst affected group when it comes to depression. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. But and as Dr. Harish Shetty said, he's pointed out all the symptoms. But I'd like to say that you are not born with depression. You have to get there, and it's society that really pushes you along the way to get into depression. So looking at the whole debate, it's not only about depression. And you asked about the education system. Now, well, this education system hasn't been brought from Pakistan or China that it's our enemy. We've cultivated it, and hence the main issue I feel is society as such is moving from a very fatalistic society that we were in the past towards a very result-oriented society. We would leave everything to God once upon a time. Now everything is dependent on our results. And when we know that the population is so vast, the resources are scarce, the number of seats are less, then it puts a lot of pressure on you to score that particular number that you need. And hence, unfortunately, we've misplaced the journey or lost the journey, and we are only focusing on the destination today. As the other gentleman just said, that you are no longer enjoying the journey of learning, it's only about the outcome of scoring. And when right from the beginning, Bela was so right, you have children in nursery who are going for extra classes. So right from the beginning, the onus on you is to score one better than your peer. In childhood, instead of fostering a sharing and a learning together and enjoying together, you're fostering competition. And what happens with this competition is you're only focusing on scoring better than the other. You never have been taught to support the other. So it leads to isolation from your peers, from your friends. You don't have that sponge, that network that absorbs your stress, and you are as good as your last exam marks. And hence that one time when you don't score that, so there's two types of kids. Those who have not been doing well always, that means if the result was the only issue, those who are not doing well always would have always ended up suicidal when the 12th standard marks come along. That's not the case. It's very often those who have been doing very well, suddenly once they drop, they might be contemplating this. So the issue is about resilience. The issue is about accepting failure. Winning at every cost has been replaced by the fear of losing. So though you have to bring in a winning element or a competitive element in your child, don't do it at the expense of his not being able to deal with fear of losing. And hence the ability to hear no, the ability to face, not being able to face a rejection or a dejection is the problem. So I'd like to end by saying what Gautam Buddha said. He said one of the 4 truths of life is despair. So that's too strong a word, but Scott David Scott Peck in his book, The Road Less Traveled, said that life is disappointment, and that's the first lesson you need to teach your children right from the time they are young, because that's when you're okay with failure, as the other gentleman mentioned, and it's okay to fail because that's not the end of anything. Disappointment is a part of life. Who's not disappointed on a daily basis? And that, I think, is an essential lesson, rather than blaming the education system, which of course can do so much better, like Dr. Raja said. But the essential thing, the power is in our own hands while we are bringing up our children, to make them understand it's not just the marks on your sheet that matter to us. You as a child matter to us much more than your report card.
In fact, there's a phone number on your screen. If you want to call us right now, you don't have to give us your name or any of your details. You can talk directly to the doctors on the panel. Ms. Raja, I want to ask you this. There is one question that's popped up about coaching institutions. Someone said, shouldn't the government make stricter rules for coaching institutions, because they are the ones who pressurize the students most? And the entire coaching culture that has now started, where parents are putting their children in coaching classes in order to get into particular colleges, is that adding more pressure? Is there a problem there, or the lack of regulation there?
It is, in a way, it's adding more pressure, and it's also the inadequacies of certain colleges to deliver content to the children, which should not happen, and therefore there should not be any need for these coaching classes. But nervous children, nervous parents, they send their children to these coaching classes, and it's like I said, not 50 sums, but it's 150 sums, and there are 100 questions, and you have to do it in 2 days and 3 days, and you have to come back. So the sheer volume is creating the pressure. We aren't even considering whether children have learnt anything from what they're doing.
And more than coaching classes also, we forget that children are also going through, in their adolescence, they're going through a very transformative phase as well. This is the time when they're getting to know about a lot of concepts. They're getting to know about politics, about law, about their bodies, about their sexuality, about their gender, and you don't give adequate time to any of those, and you just make them focus on studies and marks and all these things. That's one of the reasons why you don't spend adequate time with your children most of the time discussing about anything else, because they go through a lot of other tensions also, and you don't discuss any of those, and you just focus on, beta exam ho gaya, chalo kitna mark leke aoge, and after you get this, I'm going to buy you a motorbike, or we'll go out drinking. This is the general kind of conversation, but that doesn't define you. And just your marks or how much which job you'll land up with doesn't define you, and that's what I guess I would squarely, of course I'll blame many other things, but I would squarely blame the parents for enforcing this pressure on their children.
Dr. Shetty, you had, the last time we talked about depression, you talked about how we live in a world where everyone is busy, everyone is preoccupied, and we're perhaps not encouraging our children to talk about their pain, to talk about their experiences, and to deal with failure. Is there a way in which we can teach our children to deal with failure better?
I think absolutely, in the sense that there are three issues here. One is that given that the parents have less time, it's easy to blame parents, but it's a very complex situation. And the first thing is, when you have less time, it is not the quality of time or the quantity of time which is required to interact with parents. What is required is, whenever you are there with your children, let them share their feelings without any judgment from the parents. Don't ask them, when is your exam? Have you studied? Have you gone to the classes? Ask them how you feel about life. And when they share feelings with the parents, and when the emotional contact time increases, the heart calms down, the mind also calms down, and the child is capable, and he's also geared to sharing. I didn't do well in my maths test in the classes today. I really got less marks than what I got last time. And then when the parents listen to these disappointments or these failures, the child calms down and he's able to do his best. What is very important is, every parent feels that if they don't do well in the 12th, things will fall. What the job of the parents is to just maintain the self-esteem of the child. It is not to just push them and also force them to get more anxious, because they are anxious in their own life. If parents relax, children are very relaxed. If parents allow to share allow the kids to share their disappointments without judgment. Children are able to share their bigger disappointments now. If the parents are not upset with the tears of the child and they don't stop them from crying, the kids grow up very healthy. Even the parents always tell the kid that if you are down, if you fail, or if you had a breakup, I'll hug you tight and I'll hug you long, I'll not leave you. We'll find answers to that. These are the things which are very important. If they maintain the self-esteem of the child will shine today, tomorrow or day after. Marks generally don't make much of a difference. But what obliquely somebody just said on the panel, reservations has caused a lot of anxiety across the country. A lot of children feel extremely stressed because the number of seats available to the open categories have really gone down to a very great extent, and that has really caused a lot of heartburn. In Maharashtra, 60% plus seats are reserved for different categories, and the children on open merit find it very difficult.
Do you believe that at this point parents are also
to the entire stress?
Parents are also treating their children's marks as some sort of prestige issue, some sort of like competitive. I mean, I've seen parents upload or post their children's results on Facebook saying this is what my daughter has done, she's made us very proud.
Both
I mean, what kind of pressure does that put on other children? It's completely, go ahead.
Kids actually feel that they have let down their parents if they have not got a prestigious seat. They feel that they have really caused shame to their parents if they don't get the numbers or the requisite seat in a college. When they see all these achievements with a lot of gold medals, the father hugging the mother hugging the father, and the media also gives a lot of pictures of the toppers, where you give sweets, the mother gives sweets to the child, and the photographer puts it on the front page. All this makes kids feel that there are only few guys who can achieve, and we are all there, but we are not actually there. In the few years ago, a major newspaper stopped actually publishing the toppers for a few years, and that had a fantastic impact across the educational state across the state of Maharashtra and the country. I think what is very important is not only to share the success of the child, but also to share how they dealt with the disappointments of the child, and that I think is something which also should be publicized. My son got very less marks, but I went to him, I sat down with him, I looked after him, I took him to a counselor, I told him that I've given birth to you and not a mark sheet, as Dr. Samir just mentioned. These are the things, these are the small chats which the parents need to do with children.
Well, Divakaran on the phone line from Chennai. Divakaran, good evening. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, there are two issues that has to be addressed to reduce the stress level of the students.
Yes.
Number one, today we are promoting them even without testing their abilities to do a competitive exam.
Right, there seems to be something wrong with that connection, but effectively I think that he was talking about teaching in a manner that treats every child as different and not rote, which was effectively what you were saying as well. Vedansh on the phone line from Ahmedabad. Go ahead, Vedansh.
Good evening, Faye. So what I would like to talk about is there's not only exams. As a teenager goes through a whirlpool of emotions at this age. So recently, I had a friend, I'm in college, I had a friend who died because of a failed relationship. So it's not only about exams. And the thing is, the divide between the parent and the student, that is increasing day by day. People are not able to convince their parents that they are going through something which is there's a shame about all of this. So you're not supposed to go through this. Parents want to raise strong children and not children who are emotionally weak. So that is the entire situation of the country. And to go to a counselor is regarded as something shameful. So that is the issue. And students are not able to convince parents that they are going through this.
That's a very good point. We also have Rekha on the phone line from Mumbai. Rekha, good evening. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Faye. Good evening.
Good evening.
What I would like to say here is I think it's high time we reform the education system. I mean, have you realized that when, the 10th standard results are out, why do you need a 95% to get admission in arts?
Yes.
I mean, what is wrong? We used to get 60 and 70% and happily get admission. And I think we turned out to be good individuals and good citizens. And I think we're doing pretty well in life. I mean, I know so many students today who are at 95 and haven't got their names in the list, in the second list and the third list. And that is what is putting extra pressure on the parents. They send their children for extra tuitions, pay extra money. What else is happening? This is what is happening. It's time to ask the colleges, what are you doing with the students? Thank you.
Absolutely. Indrapreet on the phone line from Mohali. Indrapreet, go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Faye.
Yes,
I
hello.
just wanted to tell you,
Yes.
rather we all send our kids to private schools, basically, most of us, which is very, very expensive. Then we have to send them to for tuitions, right?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
So when you spend so much, don't you think the pressure mounts on the parents as well as the students when they see a major chunk of the family income has gone basically just for the education?
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Let's actually deal with these one by one. I saw Dr. Dalwai's hand go up. Dr. Dalwai, here's the first question that came up. When children need counseling or where young people need counseling, there is an embarrassment that's involved. Parents don't want to accept that my child sees a counselor or needs help in any way or is emotionally perhaps in need of any care. Do you find that often coming up when you are dealing with parents and students?
All the time, because they haven't understood the English meaning of the word counseling. The word counsel means to advise. It doesn't mean a doctor for mad people. Counselor is advice. You go to a chartered accountant all the time. He is a counselor. He counsels you, advises you about your money. You go to an architect to build a house. He counsels you about. So it's about advice. We just need to get the message across that you're taking advice from a professional rather than just all those shows that happen on radio nowadays and you have Love Guru and whatnot. Harish Bhai said that very well once. So that's the first part. The other part is right from the time you are in nursery, there is this mom's WhatsApp group which is so funny. I mean, I find it ridiculous. All these moms of the kids who are in nursery or play school have a WhatsApp group, and once the child draws a circle, the mom puts it on the group, and all the other moms who ask their kid to draw a circle that then he doesn't, they themselves go into depression. So it's just competition that's kind of building it up. My point, and again, like so many of the other panelists said, parents have to realize that, I ask parents, when you come to me as a doctor, somebody's recommended you, right? You say, right. Did you ask them how many marks I got in standard 10th or 12th? Does that matter to you today, how many marks I got in MBBS, whether I passed on my first attempt or my 20th attempt? It doesn't. You came to me because somebody told you I can do a good job. And that's exactly what you need to follow with your kids. It's how your kid is able to deal with the situation at home, in the neighborhood.
So, you know what, let me ask this question, and someone should.
The most important school.
Dr. Shetty and Dr. Dalwai. Dr. Dalwai, to become a doctor, and let's be honest about the fact that there are a lot of parents in the country who want their children to either become doctors or engineers. To become a doctor, how much pressure did you put on yourself in your 12th standard exams?
I studied hard.
A lot. But it wasn't like a life.
A lot of options.
Harish Bhai, what do you say?
And
yes, okay, first Dr. Shetty first. Dr. Shetty first, go ahead.
I think, I was focused, I studied hard, but there was no whip in the hands of my father or mother. We were laughing, we were eating, and we put our best, and we got in. But now it is not easy. Now it has become expensive. Now the number of kids appearing for the entrance exams are much higher. And the days have changed. So if I had not got into MBBS, I would not have died. My father and mother would still have hugged me, and I would have looked at other options also. The point is, we looked at the entire horizon of opportunities. We did not look at only one. If you do BSc, you would not go and commit suicide. If you do BCom, you would not go and commit suicide. It's okay not to become a doctor, but today, because of this pressure across all variables, children feel that parents have spent so much money, and if they don't really get in, they cannot show their face to the parents. There is pressure internalized by the children, even in families where parents are very cool, and they believe that they should give a gift of marks to their parents, and if they do not, they feel they have committed a great sin, a great crime, and they're so ashamed that they want to do something wrong. There has to be a massive movement among parents to say that we want to raise healthy kids, Healthy kids would mean accept their marks as it is so that they can improve tomorrow and improve in the future. Competition is essential, but acceptance has to be more than the marks which the children get.
Yes, I want to come to that point.
As he is or as she.
Faye, can I just say something at this point, Faye?
Okay, Dr. Dalwai, go ahead.
So, Faye, can I just add something to what Harish Bhai said? Yeah, so I must say that I had more pressure in my MBBS days than in my 12th. And the reason is very clear. When I was doing my 12th, I was with my parents. And that's why you will find more of these incidents happening in, say, the IITs or the engineering or medical colleges. Because the difference is, till you are in 12th, you are at your home. But after that, when you move in with maybe the hostel or the campus, and if you do not have a good peer network or a support, the isolation perhaps worsens the sense of fear and the sense of failure. So like Dr. Harish Shetty has said so truly, it's the parents who keep giving you and teaching you that if plan A fails, there are 25 more alphabets. And I think that's the mantra parents must practice with their kids. That if plan A fails, there are 25 more alphabets.
There are other options. You know, I want to ask Ms. Raja about the cost, and someone brought it up. She said we pay for the school, which is already very expensive. Annual fees is now run into lakhs and lakhs of rupees for ordinary schools. These are not even special, you know, like the expensive schools. Over and above that, there's money being paid to coaching classes, to tuition classes, to, you know, special classes that teach you to calculate and do maths in like a whiz of some kind. So when you're investing that much money, it becomes almost natural then for the parents to expect the children to do well.
See, I think it's a lot to do with the relationship between the parent and the child. And when they post these marks and things like that, and they show everything on Facebook, like Dr. Shetty and Dr. Dalwai were saying, what happens is there is a degree of lowered self-esteem in the parents, okay? And they are living through the children, possibly unaware of the pressure that they're putting on the children.
Right.
Now, this whole thing of putting them in the best of schools and all the costs are something that they've done to themselves, in a manner of speaking. Because I know children who have gone to very ordinary schools and are doing extremely well today.
Yes.
So this is an expression of my own insecurity when I do this. And then I post it here and there and the children get pressurized. There is another factor called frustration tolerance, which we don't deal with at all within our children. We would do it if we were parents who understood our children and who spent time besides telling them, now sit down and study and get your books and do this and do that. Because children who have a good sense of frustration tolerance are able to deal with failure much better.
Yes. You know, Harish, the other question that we must bring up, and there are people involved bringing this up, is social media. The big change between when we were in school and today is social media. Today, the children who are 13, 14, 15 are natives of social. They grew up in this environment. They're different from us. They were born after the internet, so they're a different breed. Is that adding a different kind of pressure to them?
I think previously we used to have a pressure of pados ka pintu, you know, pintu, pados mein pintu hai, usko zyada marks mil gaya.
Yes.
Now you don't even have to have your parents at times.
Yes.
You just go on social media and you see every coaching class advertising on how many illustrious students they have. So it adds the extra pressure on the child, and somewhere it adds the pressure of a ranking system. The child feels that, you know what, there are so many people beyond me, and I've probably missed the bus, or there is always this pressure of how will I go back home, because where do my parents stand also? You know, if I don't get enough marks, my mother has spent so much money, they work so hard.
Will they be embarrassed?
Will they be embarrassed, and have they lost all their money? It's like putting your money in some kind of a gamble and you losing your money, you know. So it's
have I let my parents down?
Yes.
Have I wasted their money?
You know, when I failed,
I think it's also, you know, a question of having multiple siblings.
Absolutely.
I had multiple siblings. There was always someone who was doing really well, so you defect. There's somebody else.
It helps when you have multiple siblings. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's also, it's a question of
So, Faye,
too
can I
much of
just add
exposure.
something?
Too much of exposure. You know, I'll come to you, Dr. Dalwai, but in the interest of confessions, I must also tell you, I went to a state syllabus school. It was a government-aided state syllabus school. It was a regular school. It was not expensive. I was a middling, average, unremarkable student through my entire schooling. I was good at some things, I was terrible at some others. I could barely spell when I was in school, but it was okay. Life is fine. You don't have to hinge your entire life on being first or second in the 12th standard. Dr. Dalwai, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I went to a same school, 5 rupees for class 5 and 10 rupees for class 10, and it was the best school ever. And I'd like to make this statement to parents that you have all these advertisements for global schools, international school, perhaps interstellar schools, but the most important school for your child is the family and the neighborhood. That's the most important school for your child. The neighborhood teaches your child resilience, how to deal with people, to have fights with people, and to patch up. And we've taken that away completely because it's these classes. And one last thing I'd like to say about how the system has changed. You know, when we were in 10th and 11th, you would go to the college or the school and there would be a big notice board put up and you would have all your friends around you. You mentioned multiple siblings like I had as well. And you had all your friends and you would look at the number. You would have your parents around you. So there was a support system right there. Now you are alone in class 12th or whenever you're downloading your results in the middle of the night. You could be alone. And then you have this whole thing of having to go and confront someone and tell them about your marks. I think this is one thing we must consider going back to. Maybe put it up where everybody can go. You can go with your parents, there's somebody with you, and you can look across and say, okay, I'm very happy I got good marks, but look at my friend, he looks so unhappy. Hey, what happened to you? Here, all of you on your mobile phones or your laptops, away in your house, alone, isolated, that's not the best way for you to get bad news in a very depersonalized, unpersonalized manner. I think we must change that.
Absolutely. Yes, you want to say something?
When I failed in my 12th and I failed again in my first year, okay, I'm a double failure. So when I failed, you know, my professor came up to me, her name is Lagbir Kaur, and she came up to me and she just said, oh, we have you one more year for a college festival, you can concentrate on the college festival. She just said that and she left. Oh. My mother, when she got to know about it, she just came, she hugged me and she said that there's so many things that you're good at. You probably can concentrate on those things right now, and beech mein you just have to study for one paper. You failed in one paper, just study for that paper and you'll pass. So it was, so though I was petrified, my parents didn't, and my father was a little strict, but my mother was absolutely okay. She said that it's okay, and there are other people who have failed but they have not told you. So she kind of made up a story also so that I feel at home. So I think that's very important, that you can come and share bad news with your parents.
Dr. Shetty, is it important for parents to talk about their failures? Because a lot of times people talk about their successes, but nobody ever talks about, you know, no parent will sit at the dinner table if you know, families have dinner together and say, you know what, when I was in the 10th standard, I totally failed, but it was fine, I turned out okay. Would that be helpful in your opinion?
In fact, we conduct workshops on sharing bad news, and what is very important, it should start very early. It should start at a very small age when there's light-hearted conversations. Parents talk about their failures in academics, failures in different walks of life, not as a glory but as a story, very gently, and that encourages the children to share their bad news. I still remember my son. He had a maths test and he came to me and I asked him, where is your maths marks? He said, my teacher has not come. On the next day he said, my teacher is sick. On the next day he said that my teacher is hospitalized. And on the next day he said the teacher is no more. And I picked up that small page from his bag and I saw that he had got 8 out of 80. And that's the day when I told both my sons, whatever happens, you have to come and share. And I think if parents share their bad news at home, children will share their bad news too. If the father says in the office, my salary has been cut and I did very badly and I feel upset about it, but it's okay, then the kids will come and share bad news. That's one of the greatest softwares which parents should induct in children right from a small age. But what mistakes parents make, they start sharing that bad news in the 9th standard because they suddenly want to become friends. They're scared that if they are not friends, their children might harm themselves. they might do something wrong, they might not focus on the studies. So that looks very artificial, and the children come to me in my clinic and tell me, how is it that my mother is a friend suddenly in the 9th standard? Where was she for so long? How is my father a friend suddenly in the 8th standard, and where was he so long? So sharing bad news early is one of the most important softwares parents should inculcate in children right when they are at the age of 3, 4 and more, and that I think is very important.
All right, I just have to take a few phone calls, but I will come back to what you want to say. Dan on the phone line from Chandigarh. Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, Faye. I like the issue that you take up, and I don't miss the show.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, the thing is, first of all, I have a couple of points written down here. There's a lot of insecurity in our society, and there's the supply and demand is totally out of sync, and the low wages of non-graduates, there's a lot of pressure on the parents as well as kids to get a job where they can survive. Now, this curriculum is too much for our kids. Look at US, look at Europe, look at all these developed nations. It's not like this. Why do we have to go through this?
Yes, why do we have to put so much pressure on our children? Osama Aziz from Lucknow, go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening.
And good evening to all the learned panel. Dr. Ma'am, myself, PGT Maths in Lucknow.
Okay.
I have taught in Sri Ram Engineering College and other reputed institutes.
Okay.
What I have observed, as per my opinion, few things I want to consider, that there are respective syllabus as per CBSE, ISC and UP board and other board, state government boards.
Yes.
My schooling is for my ICSE. I have taught both CBSE and ISC.
Yes.
In class 10th, in CBSE board, till class 10th, they do use very precise syllabus. Very precise.
Yes.
And as soon as the student comes after clearing class 10th to class 11th, there is the syllabus just up to mark to the competition level, that is IIT. So the student gets worried, so where to go?
Okay.
So where to go to the coaching and others?
Yes, I understand. So basically that's when the coaching does come in. Dayanand Bhardwaj on the phone line from Noida. Mr. Bhardwaj, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, I wanted to say that the gentleman who was speaking is also PGT Maths, but I have also been PGT Maths throughout my life.
Yes.
I have 42 years of teaching in top schools of Delhi, modern school and other schools. I have been HOD of mathematics.
Yes.
So, what I have experienced is that, first of all, the principal has to see that teachers teach in such a way so that they don't have to seek even 1% help from the outside help. They don't have to depend. This is what the principal's duty is. They have to ask the teachers to teach in such a way so they don't have to depend upon outside help. This is point number one. Point number two is, if still some students are there who are not up to the mark, then they have to be separately put in a certain group, and the teachers have to always encourage them, and teachers have to help them separately. Their studies have to be little separate from the other students, and I would advise that most focus, maximum focus should be on such students.
Okay. Ms. Raja, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Taking it further, I'm going to backtrack a bit, and from what Dr. Shetty said about sharing, this is something we encourage in when families come to us. We call it circle time, where parents and children sit together for dinner around the table and everybody shares their day's experiences, which could be good or could be bad. So if I am a student and I'm doing badly and I hear that my mother or my father hadn't done too well in a certain aspect of their day,
yes,
it gives me courage to come out and say that, yes, even I did badly in my math test.
Yes.
So it's a very important thing. The circle time is an extremely important therapy for these.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left, and I actually want to boil it down to the brass tacks at this point. If we see, and this could be anybody, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague. If you see someone is in distress, or is depressed, or is behaving oddly, like Dr. Shetty said, perhaps is under pressure, what do we do? Harish?
The first thing that we do is we comfort the person and we listen to the person. I think there is no greater power than listening. And I personally believe, rather than, because advice is something that can be given by a professional, but you don't need to be a professional to listen. You just listen actively and just make the person feel comfortable in whatever state that the person is in. And just because, especially when the person is angry or in a lot of angst, the person is very high on emotion. Just allow the person to settle his
saying
emotions.
things like, don't worry, yaar, everything will be okay is not
Don't say anything. Okay. Probably just hold the person and say, oh, you wanted to say something, let's speak. The more the person speaks, the more the person gets relieved, and the more the person starts trusting in you. I think that's the first step.
That's the first step. Dr. Shetty, at what point would you advise parents to consider counselling both for themselves and their children?
I think when they see a child in distress, what is important is to see whether there's a sprain of the mind or fracture of the mind. If it's a bad day and if he has had a good year, just a bad day, we do what Harish said. But if we find that in spite of the listening and in spite of all reassurance, love, a holiday, the child still continues having negative thoughts, that's the time when we need to say that he or she needs to see a psychologist, a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. So differentiating between a sprain of the mind and fracture of the mind is extremely important. And when you are in doubt whether it's a sprain or a fracture, just assume it's a fracture and see that he goes and sees a mental health professional for a screening. Just like when you have a pain in the chest, you go and do an ECG. When there's a pain in the mind, screen the child via a mental health professional and not just give advice which may be just generic and may not be very useful. It may be disastrous because the child might go and do something which could be harmful to him or her.
Dr. Dalwai, what should parents do and at what point?
Yeah, so when you're with a person who's in an emotional state, like Mr. Iyer said, it's very important that you let the other person speak. You don't need to speak much. But on your behalf, what you can do is by actions. Your words may not mean much to that person in distress. So a warm handshake, or like Dr. Harish said, a warm hug, those are things which are very important. Regarding counseling, when would you need counseling? I think even when you do go to a counselor, very often you go with a mindset to hear, oh, there's nothing wrong with your child. Nobody is trying to prove that there's something wrong with your child. It's very open. It's very important to keep an open mind. And if it is screened, like Dr. Shetty said, it's screening for some problem, it's up to you to kind of look at how to go ahead with it. Well, I think the difficulty is not just approaching a mental health professional, but the difficulty then lies in accepting it. And I very often see people who do go and take some advice, do get screened, but they would then be dismissive about it, because then comes the issue of them accepting it. So what's very important to have an open mind to accept if there is a problem and to know that you can work with it and get better. I think that's very important, is to have an open mind yourself.
All right, we're going to leave this here right now because we've run out of time, but we'll continue to have these conversations on prime time because I believe that's the way to get through to as many people as possible. I just want to leave you with one thing. Being an engineer is specific to someone who likes to design either machines or software. Being a doctor is specific to someone who will heal and care for sick people. There used to be a time when parents would push their children to be doctors and engineers because they were the highest paying jobs in the country. Today there are lots of jobs that pay just as well. It's about what the individual is talented for, is skilled for, and what they would like to do. I suppose at the end of the day, in this world of social media where there are so many screens trying so hard to get so much of our attention, it's about simply our ability to listen to each other. Thanks for watching.